the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Well, today I keep my promise. I said that we would unveil a budget that was reform-oriented, we maintain the tax cuts for the state of Ohio, and we would create an environment of entrepreneurship, job creation.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. Ever since election night back in November, everything has pointed to March the 15th and the release of Governor John Kasich's first budget. The governor faced an $8 billion deficit over the next biennium, 2012-2013 budget years. As a candidate, Kasich had promised not to raise taxes and to pursue a program of privatization. The budget reflects those goals. In addition to no increase in taxes, a proposed $1.8 billion cut in schools, the governor is proposing the sale, privatization, of 5 state prisons and the state liquor sales system. This would generate income from the sale and lessen future operating costs. He has already privatized the economic development function of the state. He did not propose to sell the Ohio Lottery or the Ohio Turnpike at this point, but holds that out as a goal for the future. The local government fund will be reduced 25% in the first year and 50% in the second year, or another 25%, saving the state $1.3 billion, but in turn putting pressure on villages, cities, and townships to deliver services like road repair and senior services. One area impacted is on the delivery of an array of social services to children, family, those with medical and developmental disabilities, senior citizens, and others. To discuss the implications of the budget proposal on these services, I am joined this morning by Margaret Hulbert, who is the Vice President for Strategic Resources and Public Policy for the United Way of Greater Cincinnati. She leads United Way's efforts to work with local, state, and national government and private companies and foundations to develop effective funding partnerships for all the services delivered and supported by United Way. And also with Moira Weir, the Director of the Hamilton County Jobs and Family Services. Moira joined the agency in 1993 as a children's services worker and has risen through the ranks to become the Director in 2007. Welcome to Newsmakers, Moira. Welcome back. This is a huge undertaking, this budget. And Margaret, I know you pay lots of attention. This is a major responsibility. As you look at this budget, one of the things it seems to me that I'm hearing is there's still a lot of question marks. Even though it's a budget, all the details aren't filled in here yet, right?
They are not. The governor has released some of what he intends to do, and his department heads are talking with the legislature about that now. But the actual budget bill is not in place, and some of the details have yet to be released.
Is that unusual?
It's a little bit unusual, but maybe not given the circumstances. We had a transition in governors, a fairly quick one. We had what some of my friends refer to as a hostile takeover, meaning that it changed parties. And so a good analogy, one of the people I work with describe it as if you had a major corporation that employed the number of people state government employed, and then you turned over leadership of that, and then you had to fire all of your senior officers, and then within a month come up with a budget for the next 2 years. That's what Governor Kasich is facing, and so it's quite a challenge to do that and do it quickly and do it right.
Maura, over the last several years, Hamilton County Job and Family Services has experienced a lot of cutbacks. Mm-hmm. And one of the things when you've been on in the past, we've pointed out is that a lot of that money was state money flowing through the county, even though the title is Hamilton County. Mm-hmm. A lot of that was state money. How many cutbacks let's just do personnel for a moment. How many cutbacks have you already experienced over the last several years?
We've reduced our staff by 50%. We had about 1,693 employees 4 years ago, and to date we have 784, roughly.
Okay, and as you look at this budget, and I know it's early, and we just talked about how it's not clear yet, what do you see for your agency?
Well, just to go back, we have had a 50% cut over the last 4 years with our operating budget with funding. And we were actually anticipating about a 15 to 20% cut with this budget, and actually everything is pretty much in line with what we were anticipating. So for us, we're not really shocked. In fact, we were prepared for the reductions. Obviously, I think we have prepared and are in a good position to manage those cuts, to continue to deliver services to the families in this community, continue to think how we can do services more efficient, less costly, really being at the same time wanting to meet families where they are so they don't necessarily have to come downtown. So we're trying to do a lot through social media and things like that so we can reach that our population and provide good services. So we will be making adjustments, and as Margaret has indicated, we're still trying to get to the details of the budget, but for us, there really weren't any major surprises, and I think it's because of some good stewardship the last 4 years about really preparing and making the sacrifices that needed to be made and really preparing ourselves for this.
Margaret, as the people I've talked to in the human services field, social services fields over the last several months getting ready for this budget, people feared just incredibly drastic cuts. Is that what we're seeing in this budget?
We're not seeing drastic cuts, and I do not know Governor Kasich, but he has been very clear that poverty is a major concern of his. And I think if you look at the budget as it has been presented, it is clear that that's true. He has really, I think, surprised some of us by how much he has left in place for low-income families and for people struggling because of this recession. For example, and even some of the long-term future work that allows families to position their children well for school and other things. At the United Way, we're very concerned about evidence-based home visiting programs. We think that's the way you get children started out right, that you get them prepared for kindergarten so that we don't continue to have children who are failing school before they hit third grade. And the governor actually, with a 7% cut, left most of that money and most of that program intact and has said that he believes in early childhood education. He had to make some pretty significant cuts in child care assistance for low-income families. They have reduced intake on that program from 150% to 125%, which makes a great deal of difference, because if you're a family at 125% of poverty, you aren't making enough money to actually keep children in child care.
So, for example, if, say, we had a single mother with a couple of kids, what would be the income they would have to, how does that work right now? I mean, how much would they have to pay? And
right now, if you're a single mother with 2 children, and you are at 150% of poverty, it means you make slightly less than $28,000 per year. Now the program will have 125% of poverty eligibility, and that means you're going to make about $23,000 a year. Now, if you think of the cost of child care as roughly $6,000 per child, you can understand why a low-income mother cannot afford to put their child in child care, particularly quality child care, which is what is important for low-income children.
So that's that balancing effort between supporting people so they can be out in the workforce versus, which is one of Governor Kasich's goals, is to get people back to work. On the other hand, trying to limit the amount of money that goes into child care in this particular situation, or being careful about that.
That's correct. I think if you look at a number of the areas, whether it's food security or child care or developmental disabilities, all of these different areas, seniors in particular, where the governor has made some, I think, pretty remarkable investments. One of the things that we're particularly pleased with is that he has moved a great deal of the funding in the long-term care funding pool into more flexible community-based funding for seniors. Right now, and for many governors in many years, our budget has favored putting elderly people in nursing homes over keeping them in their own homes where they would prefer to be. It's a cost-effective approach to keep them in their homes and keep them out of much more expensive nursing home care. But the nursing home lobby has been very effective at directing money toward the nursing home care. Which
is a good reminder that this is a budget that's been proposed. This isn't the budget until the legislature adopts it.
Right.
We talked a little bit about personnel, but are there programs that are directly impacted in your area by this budget that you've been able to see? Things that you won't be able to, areas that you won't be able to do?
Well, one of the programs that was cut statewide was the kinship, and that's an important thing in children's services. As we work with families, we really want to engage families and kin to help support our children. What does that mean for us? It really means that we'll have to look at our local dollars to see how we can still provide that support to families, because we do know that it's important in the child welfare field, particularly when you're involved with a child that's safety is at risk. You really want to engage the whole family system to help try to keep that child safe, and sometimes temporarily you have to look at other family members to help keep that child safe. So there are things like that, but it really puts a big reliance on us, particularly in children's services, at how lucky we are to have a levy, and then really focus in on using those local dollars.
Well, and that's one of the things I want to raise here, and in this sense, the social services area and the schools, there's a parallel. With this cutback in state funding, local funding is going to be even more important. Is that fair to say? And you've got, and there's a levy in this child
right.
care.
I mean, it certainly is for us, particularly with the children's services. And I mean, I do want to say that the state really only gives children's services about 6% of the overall budget. The rest comes from the federal government and the levy. But as you see those resources shrink from the state, you really need to, I mean, you're continuing going back and prioritizing your mandates, and really looking at what's the true mandate, as well as how do we provide the services, realizing that child safety is paramount, and so you want to continue to focus in on providing, making sure that you're ensuring that every child is safe that we touch. At the same time, you know, as the numbers have, as the funding has decreased, the need in the community has grown. And to give you an example, right now, currently in Hamilton County, 1 in 6 residents are individuals, I should say, are on food stamps. When you think back to
1 in 6 in
individuals
all of county.
in all of the county.
Wow.
And if you think back about 2.5 years ago, that number was roughly 1 in 12, 1 in 11. So, you know, we touched Job and Family Services through either child support or children's services. We touch 1 in 3 individuals in this county. So we have continued to be able to actually provide those services, but at the same time, we're always looking at what is the mandate, how do we provide them, and making sure that we're meeting the needs of the community.
Margaret, Maura brings up this sort of local support, whether it's local taxes or United Way, support for services that are being cut on the state level. How much flexibility is there for that?
There isn't a lot of flexibility, and it isn't just the state level, and that's the point I would make to people. We've all watched the debate between the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate about how much to cut out of the current budget. And the House is considering as much as $65 billion out of our current budget. The Senate is offering something in the neighborhood of $6 or $7 billion. But my point would be that you're seeing dramatic cuts at the federal level, you're seeing significant cuts at the state level, and then all of those flow down to the local level. As things are getting worse and people are needing more services, they have less ability to give. Although I will tell you, my experience at United Way, and it kind of shapes how I view government, is how generous people are. I have watched people who knew they were going to be laid off, who are still making commitments through United Way to support other people. That's the kind of generosity we see every day. But now in the public sector, you have a huge debate about how much government can we afford. So even as we are, and I will say again, the governor, I think, has generously supported some of the program funding, we're seeing the funding that undergirds the public system eroding on the federal, state, and local levels. And as Moira described, you know, we can have money for child care and we can have money for food stamps, but if she doesn't have money to run her program, then we can't get people those services. And that's where I am most concerned, I think.
Okay, very good. This has really thrown a different set of lights on this budget discussion that I've been able to read so far. So thank you for being here. We'll stay in touch as this develops, and thank you for the work you do in our community. Stay tuned. After the break, I'll be joined by the Superintendent of Schools for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati to discuss a new effort to bring central control of Catholic education, not seen in 40 years. Welcome back. The Archdiocese of Cincinnati stretches over 19 Ohio counties, reaching from Cincinnati and Hamilton County to Adams County in the east and northward Through Dayton to Mercer and Auglaize counties, 113 Catholic schools operate in this vast area, making it the 8th largest school system in the nation, Catholic school system in the nation. The shorthand way people refer to these schools is the Catholic school system. But 40 years ago, in 1971, the Archdiocese formally dissolved the system, setting each parish school and the high schools, now numbering 23, on their own. The Diocesan School Office offers a variety of services, but not centralized system of direction and control. Earlier this month, the Archdiocese announced that it will create a unified vision and strategic plan for Catholic primary and secondary schools. To discuss the Archdiocesan Visioning Plan, I am joined this morning by Dr. Jim Rigg, the Director of Educational Services and Superintendent of Catholic Schools. Jim, welcome to Newsmakers, and also welcome to Cincinnati.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So we were talking, and you've been living in Colorado, so it's good to have you here.
I appreciate that.
What's the motivation for this plan? Why now?
Well, the answer is fairly complex, but the short answer is that we feel that the climate surrounding our Catholic schools has changed. We're fortunate to have some of the best schools, Catholic or otherwise, in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and it's our hope that we can continue to preserve the high quality that our schools offer, but do so in a more communal, thoughtful, purposeful way. So I've mentioned that the climate has changed around the schools. Our schools here and really nationwide are facing issues in new and different ways that we have not seen before. Most of those issues are related to finances. The cost of education has risen dramatically across the country. It costs more to provide good programs to students. And so what we're hoping to do is to create a vision that provides us with a roadmap of how we can prayerfully and purposefully move forward with our schools and continue to provide the quality of education that our schools have established.
What does that practically mean? Is part of this plan to make a decision about whether you've got the right schools, right number of schools in the right places? I mean, for example, too many clustered near the center cities, and in these booming suburban areas, a lot of parishes never created a Catholic school. Are we talking about creating new schools? Are we talking about closing schools? What are we talking about?
Well, first of all, I want to emphasize that our vision will not just address what I think we're talking about, which is more finances and demographics. There are really 7 areas that we're hoping our vision will address, and I'll just breeze through those 7 areas if that's okay, in no particular order. One is academic excellence, so ensuring that our schools can continue to provide the academic quality that we're known for, raise the bar high, propel students into
Does that mean standardization of the curriculum across the schools?
Well, we do already have a common curriculum in our Catholic schools at most grade levels, and we will never dictate a sort of cookie-cutter model for all of our schools. We want our schools to be able to make adjustments depending upon their population, upon the strengths and needs of the students and so forth. But really it's being sensitive to the data in a more systematic way, looking at the archdiocesan level of where are areas of strength, where are areas in which we need to work, and pooling our resources, pooling our ideas, and learning from each other so that we can continue to provide academic excellence all over the Archdiocese. So,
what does that mean in terms of the private Catholic schools, the St. Xavier's, the Ursuline Academies? Are they part of this?
They sure are. They're important schools. They're excellent schools. There are different types of schools throughout the Archdiocese. At the elementary level, the majority of our schools are parish elementary schools, sponsored, owned by their parishes. Amongst the high schools, we have a rich variety of archdiocesan schools, schools that are owned and operated by religious orders, and then truly independent schools. And our purpose in constructing this vision is not to sort of take over the independent schools, but to work with them and move forward with them in establishing a common vision. The Archdiocese has a rich history of very localized control, and there are some strengths in that. But there are also some weaknesses. We want to look at all of our schools, all 113 schools across the Archdiocese, look at certainly upholding their unique traditions and identities, and those won't go away, but also looking at how we can set common goals and, to a certain extent, common practices among them.
So getting back to, you were going through these various areas, so quality, curriculum, and related to that, I'm sort of a curriculum guy myself. You know, one of the issues over the years has been, and it ties to the first part of this show, and that is Governor Kasich has called for doubling the number of vouchers in Ohio. Many of those children would go to Catholic schools. Do you look for more of voucher students in Catholic schools? And secondly, if more state-supported children are in Catholic schools, should Catholic schools be using the same common testing and publishing that testing so that parents can really see academically how Catholic schools match up against other schools that are their options?
Well, it's a great question, and I'm aware of what is in the budget, the governor's budget regarding vouchers for the next biennium. And we support vouchers. Our hope is to provide a Catholic education to anyone who wishes to come, regardless of their economic background. It's expensive to offer the quality education that we offer, although our cost per pupil is lower than that of the public schools. But it's also an important part of our mission to make that education available to anybody who wishes to come. So in regards to vouchers, we see that as an advantage to have state dollars allowing families to come. Of course, each family needs to determine whether a Catholic school is the most appropriate for their child. You know, we are unapologetically Catholic in our schools. It's vital that we remain Catholic in the way we teach and in the identities that we have within our schools. That doesn't mean all of our students have to be Catholic, of course, but that does mean that we don't change our approach regardless of the faith background of the students that come to us.
But what about that question of test results? This
Right.
has been,
Right.
we've reported on education here a lot, and that's one of the problems. The assumption is Catholic schools are better, but the data isn't there. You do testing, but it's not necessarily the same testing. You don't necessarily publish it.
It's not necessarily the same testing. We do have a standardized testing program in the Catholic schools. At the elementary level, it's the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. It's an excellent test that we feel best aligns with our curriculum. The students that come to us through the Educational Choice Voucher Program are required by state law to participate in the state testing program, so they do take those tests. But we don't use the test results like the public schools because we don't see that testing program, the state testing program, as our primary standardized test. So, for instance, in the elementary schools that accept students with vouchers, not all students are taking the state test because they're not required to, not being part of the voucher program, those that are not part. So, you know, we're looking at data. Our vision as we're moving forward is very data-centric. We're looking at academic data. We're looking at data related to faith formation and Catholic identity. We're looking at data related to operations and finances and demographics. And so standardized testing data will be an important part of that, but we've chosen in the Catholic schools to emphasize a different testing program and to use that when setting academic goals.
So getting back to this question of, through this process, you know, talking about some of the Catholic inner city schools, the size schools particularly, do you see ways of consolidate, strengthening, or building new? I mean, how do you think, and the timeline on this is you expect this whole process to be finished by the middle of next year, 2012, right? Fairly quickly. So what do you think is going to happen here?
Well, finances and demographics are definitely key areas we're going to look at in our vision. It is important that we position our schools to best meet the needs of those who wish to come. I've had people ask, you know, is this going to result in widespread closures of our schools? The answer is no. It's certainly not our hope or our intention to close large numbers of schools, but we will be looking at data related to individual schools and parishes and regions and cities and counties and so forth, and try to, again, look at each school and how we can best position it to meet the needs of the population around it.
Yeah, I know you've been asked that question before, and you use this term widespread. You're saying not widespread, but that is an option, though.
We don't know what this vision is going to look like in a year and a half. We're at the beginning of our journey.
And on the finance side, we're at time. On the finance side, as a result of this plan, will the central office have more control over, say, tuition levels and costs from school to, standardizing things across the schools?
It's too early to know for sure. Again, we're at the beginning of our journey, but we are looking at this area. Finances is a critical concern in many of our schools, particularly those that have experienced declines in demographics, Catholics moving away from their schools, economics in their area. We are going to be employing someone in our office in July who will be a specialist in the area of school finance, who will be positioned to assist the schools. I would hesitate at this point to call that control, because of the way our schools are structured in their governance.
Okay, I need to get out, but thank you very much. And if you want to follow the development of the process, the Archdiocese website, www.catholiccincinnati.org, or the online Catholic Telegraph is at www.thecatholictelegraph.com. Either of those can be helpful. Thank you, Jim, for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll follow this story. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the men and the women working to shape our community for the future. Have a good week.